About 2 years ago, there was a lot of talk that Israel was going to bomb Iran. Israel being concerned that most of all of their neighbors hate them, but Iran has a lot of resources, the second biggest reserve of energy in the world. And Israel was worried that, in fact, Iran was building a nuclear weapon. And so there was lots and lots of headlines and news and opinions and stories that, in fact, the jets were already flying towards Iran to drop bombs or a bomb on Iran. And you'd hear things like, this week or next week, the chance of war with Iran very high. And first of all, you got to appreciate that newspapers have to sell newspapers. But there's one thing I use to see if, in fact, news is real or if it's just entertainment. And that's kind of one thing I want to talk with you about. And it leads really into the theme for this weekend's podcast. And I want to share that with you. Hey, everybody, this is RC Peck with Fearless Wealth. And this week's theme is the most powerful trait of your brain is ... So what is the most powerful trait of your brain? And this is the most powerful trait of your brain for investment purposes, but probably truly for almost every other purpose on this planet. So what is the most powerful trait of your brain for investment purposes? The answer is it's to see patterns. It's to recognize patterns. It's to have pattern recognition, because the brain you have is incredibly efficient and powerful around seeing patterns in how your kids behave, how basically anyone else behaves except you, because you're always blind to your own. But being able to turn on those patterns, and what's the strongest pattern recognition is actually visual pattern recognition, for the brain to see patterns visually. It is designed and built around the oldest part of the brain, the R complex that sits on top of the brainstem. It is designed, and it is what got us here today in 2014. So we are the Homo sapiens, the humans. We are the ones that win, and we get to destroy the planet and not dolphins. So it's a very powerful trait of the brain. Now the question is, how can we really use it to grow money, grow security, grow freedom? So before I answer that, and I'm of course going to answer that with charts, I throw this old little Chinese inscription to you, which says, 100 rumors are not comparable to one look. And isn't that the truth? Isn't it the truth that you could go on any dating service website on the planet, and if there were not pictures, that company would fail, that service would fail, because you know what? Pictures are pretty darn important. One look at that image, one kind of visual pattern recognition will tell you whether you should keep reading the page or not. So let's look at some patterns here. Let's look at this, what we have here. So on the screen, you have two lines, a red line kind of going straight up about 21% over the last 3 years. And you have a blue line that is down almost 50% over the last 3 years. Well, the red line is the world stock market index. So all the world indices, stock market indices, put together in one price line, one squiggly red line, and it's up almost 21% over the last 3 years. And then you have the Russian stock market, which is the blue line, and that is down 48%. So without knowing anything about investing or politics or leaders, but just kind of looking at how millions or tens of millions or hundreds of millions of people are voting with their behavior, their financial behavior, their money, you can tell that something's not right in Russia, because it's down almost 50% while the world market is up 21%. That's a pretty big difference of 70 percentage point difference. So with one glance, with one look, you know that something for the last 3 years has not been working in Russia and continues to not work. So then this leads me to, how did I know that Israel was not going to bomb Iran? And all I did was look at the Israeli stock market. a price chart of the Israeli stock market, and it was going up through all of the talk of bombing and war and regional conflict. Now, what I'm showing you on the screen is actually a price chart, a zoomed in price chart of the Russian stock market. And particularly, I'm focusing on the last 4 months or what's been going on this year. So the question is, how do we know whether Ukraine will go to some sort of civil war? And it will probably be framed as a civil war, not really Russia going to war with Ukraine, because that's really not a contest, but call it what you want. But how will we know if this turns into a true shooting war? And answer is on this price chart, looking at pattern recognition. If the black line, which is the Russian stock market, breaks below the March low, the probability and chances of a civil war, the East against the West in Ukraine, incredibly goes up. The probability goes up significantly. Now, if this little price chart, if it breaks above its March high, then that means it's probably going to work itself out. They're going to shake hands and everything's going to be okay. But as you can tell by looking at this price chart, we don't know yet. The answer is we don't know. And this is one of the things that I love about price charts, because they're so, if there was a crystal ball, because there isn't, but if there was, it'd be a price chart of what is being looked at. This was also true back in the 30s. The Dow Jones, the major index of the time, bottomed years before people recognized that the US would win the World War. So the stock market knew that. Collective consciousness of those millions of people investing knew before politicians or the world consciously knew. Now I want to show you one more price chart. This is three squiggly lines. The blue line is the S&P 500. The red line is small cap stocks, and the orange line is mid cap stocks. Now the general rule of thumb is smaller stocks are riskier, bigger stocks are not. Makes sense. Bigger stocks have been around. They pay a dividend. They have a track record. A lot of them increase their dividends over many decades. Small cap stocks, no dividends, risky, could go out of business. So look at this. Back at the beginning of this year, the market fell. It fell about 5%. Now, what led us out of that fall was actually large cap stocks, not small and not mid. Why that's important is because usually you want to see the small and the mid lead out of a correction, because that kind of that means it's a stronger market and people are willing to put more money into these smaller companies. But in fact, the larger stocks moved us out of that 5% correction. You then fast forward to today, since basically mid-March, the stock market, well, has either been flat or down. Now notice what's leading us down is mid-cap and small cap. Mid-cap is actually falling faster than small cap, which is really perplexing because we should think small cap should be falling faster, but it's actually mid-cap. But whether it's small cap or mid-cap, the point is that the smaller companies are falling faster right now than the larger companies. And that means people are being more risk averse, they're being more safe with their money, and they're willing to put more of their money in the larger stocks, the S&P 500, which on the screen is the blue line, and seeing the red and the yellow line or the orange line fall faster really kind of shows us those patterns and kind of gives us that pattern recognition that, hey, you know what? We need to pay attention here. Because if the large caps moved out of the last correction 2 months ago, and the smaller ones are leading us into this, then that's something to take note. Now, this is evolving and it's unfolding in front of us. The point is that we can use our pattern recognition trait or parts of our brain to really help us grow our money and let us know when we should be in and out of certain investments, stocks, indices. And this is the foundation of how I built a lot of my strategies. And the obvious trend strategy, great name, isn't it? Obvious trend. That has beaten the stock market. I made the results public since January 1st, 2010. And since then, what's that, almost 4.5 years, the obvious trend portfolio is up about 95%. And during the same time period, the S&P 500 is up about 60%. So beating the market by 50% or 35 percentage points is significant over a 4.5 year period. And all we've done is kind of turned on the part of the brain that is exceptional at having us survive to today. And why not have it survive and grow our wealth and security and freedom as it's done so great for the last million years for humans? So I really want you to remember that the point this week, and maybe there's 2 points, but the point is that pattern recognition is more powerful than your prefrontal cortex to grow money. Meaning, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages and hundreds of hours of research reading is actually less powerful than just simply pulling up a price chart, throwing a couple lines on, and saying, hey, when it breaks this, I'll get in. If it breaks this below, I'll get out. Pattern recognition is very, very powerful. And you might as well use it because it's certainly gotten your ancestors to get you here today. That's the point this week. And really, this is just, it's just another step to help you take back control of your money and your future. You guys take care, and I'll speak to you soon.